A week ago this Sunday morning, we woke up to the country's deadliest massacre in history. All too familiar in many ways, but this time it hit close to home. And in this edition of Behind the Headlines, we're continuing the conversation, beginning with Proud. The LGBT community was the target of violence. Now locals vow to stay strong in spite of their fears.
We can't live being afraid. It's not the way to live. It's not worth living if you walk around afraid.
Then on to prayers. Muslim followers in Southwest Florida are once again standing up for their beliefs and speaking out against extremists. Plus, almost a year ago, it was a different shooting, a different state, and a different target of Americans. Now, from one survivor to the others, they are partners in loss. I'm Amy Osher. Those stories plus dual commentaries from the Daily News and the News Press are coming your way. Over time, more details related to the shooting and the shooter and victims will come to light. But here's the basics. 49 people plus the shooter died the night of the shooting at Pulse Nightclub in Orlando. Another 53 were injured. The victims ranged in age from 19 to 50 years old. A well-known hotspot, Pulse was targeted for being a gay bar. 29-year-old gunman Omar Martin from Fort Pierce, Florida, was shot dead trying to escape. As the tragedy was unfolding, he called 911 and pledged allegiance to the Islamic extremist group ISIS. Martin was born in the U.S. to Afghan parents. He was investigated several times by the FBI but never charged with a crime. Martin was armed with several weapons legally purchased, including an assault rifle. Former co-workers and his ex-wife describe him as unpredictable and violent. At the heart of it all are the victims, people taken away unexpectedly. Fort Myers doctor Andrew Gross woke up to learn someone he knew well was killed.
I saw a couple of friends of mine from up in Sarasota saying, "You have to call us." And so even before I turned on the TV, I could tell that there was something going on. And so I called them, and they told me that one of my friends was one of the ones who was shot in the club when the first names were released. So his name is Eddie Sotomayor. He was, kind of the guy who knew everything. You needed a question answered. Trivial Pursuit partner. He was your man. Very friendly, outgoing, just a really great guy. I'm confused. Was it a terrorist event, or did it involve Islamic extremism, religious extremism? Was it a guy who was more confused about his own beliefs in life? And, but it still just comes down to this, how do you walk into a place full of happy people who you've never met, young and full of life and promise, and just take that away?
The mass casualties stunned us all, and while we don't have any answers, we're devoting this edition of Behind the Headlines to sharing perspectives on the tragedy, starting with our local LGBT community. Recent years showed promise of equality, including legislation allowing same-sex marriage. The shooting came as a blow, but the community vows to stand strong and proud. Here's Arlene Goldberg, director of Pride Southwest Florida.
It was just such a shock for me. It wasn't unexpected because I know things like that happen, but just the thought of a gay club, a place where we feel safe, and it's a place for us to go where we can enjoy ourselves and just be ourselves, just be who we are. And there's not a lot of places like that. In fact, there are very few places like that. So hearing that was so hurtful, and I knew what would be ahead of us. I do take this personally because it's a hit on the LGBT community. People are always looking to do something to us. We're always being discriminated against in one way or another, but now killings. And yeah, I take it personally. It could have been us. It could have been anywhere USA. And watching this week how the LGBT community has pulled together all over the world, I don't think there's any other community that would do what we did or are doing this week. I think that the public is more supportive of us now. I think that when they look at us now, they see people. A lot of people see people instead of a lesbian or a gay person or a transgender. I'm hoping they do. I'm hoping they see us as just people, because that's really what we are. We're trying to go out and educate the public. I think a lot of it is about education. We need to educate the public about who we are, and we're just like they are, except of who we love. We can't live being afraid. It's not the way to live. It's not worth living if you walk around afraid. We have come so far in the past few years, especially with marriage equality. And I think when people thought that marriage equality passed, we're there. We're not. We have so much more to do.
Another group greatly impacted by the rampage, the Muslim community. Once again, a target of debate by political leaders and everyday people fearful of the actions of a few. Despite this, faithful believers pray for healing. And continuing the dialogue is Abdul Haq Muhammad, Executive Director of the Quality of Life Center.
Immediately, such a tragedy brings feelings of grief, disappointment, confusion, and of course, as the name surfaced, it has a name of someone that might be a Muslim. I think Muslims all throughout the country, heart stopped for a moment to see such a tragedy to take place, and such a tragedy, an action that does not represent the faith of Islam. Because of the political climate, the rhetoric that is heated up in this country, associating these horrific acts that's taking place all around the world with a faith that's largely very peaceful. If you look at the incidents and compare it with the population of Muslims around the world, one can conclude that predominantly Muslim practitioners are people of faith, people of peace. Our prayers goes out to the families, the victims. It's hurtful to see humanity treated in such ways, but this is history, isn't it? And this is the reality of the world we live in. But if we can change and respond in the most positive way, I think this is what's important when we see tragedy. So I saw Muslims gathered in hundreds, giving blood, standing outside, feeding people during the candlelight vigils, making prayer, talking to each other, priests, rabbis, imams coming together. This is the power and the mystery of these horrific incidents that may take place, but if we're positive, we're going to see something beautiful unfolding. This is an opportunity for us to join together, to pray together, to love each other, but also to become more proactive, to become more engaged, to not wait for another tragedy, but to reach across the lines in our communities, our culture, and start working with each other and better understanding each other so that we can make this world a better world. We must become, as human beings, more proactive when it comes to addressing the realities of life and trying to protect the decency and the sanctity of humanity. This is the wake-up call for us. This is vital that the people get the message.
As more acts of mass violence take place, more people gain membership in an unenviable group of victims and survivors. On June 17th of last year, a lone gunman killed 9 people, including the pastor of the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. It was also the Reverend Betty Diaz-Clark's church. As a partner in loss, she drove to Orlando to offer support to the grieving. She also spoke to our own Ryan Mills.
I realized that there is no way I could not come. Given the love and the support and the encouragement that we received in Charleston almost a year ago, I had to come and to share the love I received and yet still receive. I can honestly say that being here and supporting others, if it does for them what it did for us, we've done a lot. Just by coming, just by hugging and showing love. The message we're holding on to is a message of hope, that the best is yet to come, that even though we go through a tragedy, we can make it. I preached a series of messages from experiencing life in the valley, and for many, this is a valley experience. But the concluding message was there's victory in the valley, and that's even our theme for our 1-year commemoration. Victory in the valley, and in the midst of what we're going through, knowing that you love me and I love you, well, that's a positive. And as we continue to connect together and show the love and experience the love, we'll be a better race of people.
Still to come, a behind-the-scenes look on how we partner and bring you balanced and timely news. Stay with us. In the time spot reserved for our weekly commentary, we have a double dose. Both Alan Bartlett with the Naples Daily News and Tom Hayden with the Fort Myers News Press, each putting the tragedy in focus. We begin with Alan.
When there are heartbreaking events such as the mass shooting in Orlando that killed 49 innocent people and wounded 53, we search for ways to respond. Prayers, sympathy, vigils, flags at half-staff, donate blood. There's not much else Southwest Florida can do across the miles. Not immediately. After a reasonable amount of time for healing, however, there will be things we can do. There have been nearly 50 mass shootings in 30-plus years in the United States. There is outrage, but it slips away with time. For a significant number of potential voters who regret the choice they face between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, we suggest you watch the conventions in July and pay attention to where party platforms land on anti-terrorism, domestic security, Second Amendment, and human rights issues that are intertwined with the Orlando bloodshed. If you aren't thrilled with the Trump-Clinton choice, align with the party platform closest to where you stand on forcefully responding to nearly 50 mass shootings in 30-plus years. There will be federal and state elections this fall. Collier and Lee will choose a new District 19 congressman and help select a Florida U.S. senator. Where do these candidates stand on Second Amendment issues such as background checks and the availability of automatic and semi-automatic weapons and handguns? What do these candidates want to do to strengthen anti-terrorism activities and domestic security? For state candidates, a key issue is what they will do about Florida remaining next to last in per capita state mental health spending. Lastly, support your first responders, from staffing to equipment and tax dollars, for thorough training. Be sure to thank them for the stressful job they do. That's what I'm thinking. Join in the conversation at naplesnews.com.
Coming to grips with and making sense out of such a horrifying tragedy as what occurred in Orlando in the early morning hours of Sunday is very difficult. How could someone filled with that much hate have such little regard for and begin firing away at will, killing 50 people and wounding another 53 more? For the gay community, so impacted by this devastating event, it is difficult, if not impossible, to understand the circumstances. Several people from the gay community who have talked about what they saw or how they felt wondered where they could feel safe in this world, where they could talk freely or exhibit affection toward one another when a gunman could be lurking just outside the door. But we have talked about it after every shooting, whether in an elementary school, on a college campus, in something as personal and profound as Bible study, that fear can't win out over what is right and over our freedoms. People, no matter their faith or their sexual beliefs, should be able to congregate freely, speak freely, have fun freely, live freely. Hate crimes occur far too often in this country and around the world, whether driven by extremist groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. They are occurring far too often by people suffering from deep mental illness, as appears to be the case with the person who killed 2 people in Cape Coral just last week. We also must be careful not to stereotype Muslims or the Islamic faith, a faith of peace. The news press remains committed to bringing together the necessary stakeholders and looking at mental health weaknesses in this state and in our county, and what can be done to improve conditions and improve funding. Making sense out of such a senseless and inhuman act is almost impossible. Creating safe environments for all groups, ending terrorism, and continuing to empower the importance of voice and rights for everyone must continue to be the mission. We can't vary from that.
As always, we welcome your thoughts and opinions. Just drop us a line or email us at naplesnews.com. Coming up, we turn the page to some positive news, including a look at Heroes and Survivors. An all-female group takes part in an honor flight to visit military memorials in Washington, D.C. We'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge today is Father's Day. Maybe you've already planned something special for the man in your life. If you need a helping hand, the Daily News is rolling out a new weekend feature that could make you a date night hero.
So Pam Fisher, our features editor, brought us to this place. Why are we here? It's certainly beautiful.
It is great. Yeah, so I stumbled in here after a massage last week and was dying for a fish taco because I lived in Southern California, and this has really authentic food. And so the Baja style taco is very similar to the ones I had in Acapulco and Huatulco, and they have regional food. And so it's just the perfect spot to bring your sweetheart Father's Day weekend. And we're trying to choose places for date night that have a little bit of exotic ambiance.
Yeah, now what can you, your date night feature, what is it that you're looking for? It's not necessarily having to be the most fine dining experience, but you're looking for something different that's maybe fun for a date?
Right, so we want it to be like a little bit elegant, and this has sort of a folkloric magic sense. So
It's
the
really beautifully decorated.
Yeah, blown glass sculptures. It's kind of got that Sergio Bustamante vibe that you find at a lot of the upscale Acapulco resorts and in Cancun. So I think you'll have a sense of escaping somewhere as you go out to dinner. And so we did Cane, the tiki bar on Marco Island last week at the Marriott. And then we'll do Massa this week, which is where we're at now. And then Christine is going to do the Asian fusion Roy's next week.
What's the name of the feature, and it's a regular weekly thing, and what do you plan to do with it? Reviews, or how will it roll out?
Right, so we wanted to expand our dining reviews. These can be places that you can go with your date, or you can take your dad, and they'll just be sort of an exotic little escape. So we're trying to pick places that are upscale, but that have unique foods, whether they're Asian or Indonesian or Vietnamese or Mexican regional cuisine.
I got to go to Roy's, which is in Bayfront, and that's kind of an escape in and of itself, right? You're right on the water. We sat outside, which was kind of nice. So there was a little bit of rain that night. Even that's kind of a elegant version of this outdoor dining, you know. So we watched the boats go past, and we had, like you said, this Hawaiian-infused steak dinner. So my boyfriend had steak, I had the scallops. It came with pork belly, and we started off with this tuna poke. Is it poke?
I think it's poke, but I
learned a lot during this meal, and it tasted like sushi without the carbs. So yeah, it was great.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about the style of cuisine. So this is, you know, a regional Mexican cuisine, and these are the exact tacos that you would find in Baja California. So we used to go to Cabo on vacation, and then farther down to Acapulco, and so you'll get a sense of the flavors that you're going to try, and you'll get a sense of the preparation, and then the vibe is really important, because when you're taking someone out on a date night, whether it's your best girlfriend or dad or your sweetheart, you know, you want to have an experience. And I think experiential dining is sort of where it's at in the millennium. Yeah,
I agree.
Finally, they were ahead of their time. Lady veterans from Southwest Florida took flight last weekend, an honor flight recognizing their military service many decades ago. Some were in wheelchairs, they all had smiles. Many were trailblazers, serving in World War II. This was the second all-female honor flight, a one-day trip taking former service members to Washington, D.C. to visit a handful of war memorials.
71 years ago, my office was right over there. That used to be the U.S. Navy National Headquarters, and it's all gone, and it's delightful to see a nice, beautiful World War II monument here. You've done a great job, and all you have to do is get rid of all the wars. That's your job, okay?
The flight included 66 former veterans having served in several wars and conflicts. They ranged in age from 24 to 95. This was the area's 10th honor flight, earning it the nickname the Perfect 10. That brings this edition of Behind the Headlines to a close. You can rewatch or share this show by going to naplesnews.com or liking us on Facebook. I'm Amy Osher. We'll see you back here next week.